It's this ongoing adventure we're on where you just don't settle ever.
There are great things about being your own boss. The work will be the neediest girlfriend or boyfriend you've ever had. Things are so perfect right now that something bad's gonna happen.
With your family, with your partner, I just love how you're emotionally intelligent enough to say, hey, Liz, I'm not in a good place. I can't turn it off. Think about building a building and then hearing that the foundation is cracked.
The dog gets through the gate, pins me up against the wall. We couldn't afford our insurance, we couldn't afford gas.
1 or 2% marginal changes are hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Welcome to the Premium Mindset, the weekly podcast where homegrown entrepreneurs and business owners, Evan Ritchey and Cameron Bawden, share the good, the bad, and the ugly of modern entrepreneurship and reveal what really happens behind the scenes of their personal and professional lives. As owners of two of America's fastest growing and most disruptive companies, Coconut Cleaning and Green Mango Pest Control. Stay tuned for real stories, struggles, insight, and advice from real entrepreneurs in real time.
Have you ever neglected an area of your life? Okay. Have you ever neglected, like the idea of everybody has that drawer in their house that is just like the crap drawer. All the crap goes in there. You don't ever address it, but every couple of years you open it and you just toss everything out.
Right.
I feel like that the main driver of my deep-rooted depression these days.
Oh my gosh.
Not depression, but the main driver of the weight that we've taken on in business has been from opening up that drawer figuratively in the business. And we've said, we're just going to take everything on. We're going to go in every department. We're going to see what policies have been changed, what bad practices have crept into their department, and we're going to clean it out. And that single-handedly, from pay to operations to you name it. It's this ongoing adventure we're on where you just don't settle ever. You don't just ride off into the sunset and you say, I'm curious, why aren't we doing this? And then I go look into it. It's like I open the door and then I shut it real quick because I'm like, no, I don't want to do this. It's going to be so bad. But we've been, I'd say over the last 6 months, probably the last year and a half, but really the last 3 or 4 months due to some unfortunate circumstances of losing very high-tiered employees, have been forced into this world where we are now looking in this echo chamber, and what's being spit back is some bad practices. And it's a lot of work, but we're dealing with it. We're addressing everything head on.
You know where it all started?
With you?
No. As soon as you start really tracking your numbers with KPIs, that's where that's the value of tracking your KPIs. And not just, I'm trying to think of, what kind of KPIs did we have before James Cisco? Because James, we had good KPIs, but
job average.
Yeah, like time
sales.
At the house, sales. But then James comes in and it's like
average stops per zip code.
Yeah. Highest revenue, and that, which is just good information. I would encourage people, that doesn't matter. That just makes you feel good, right? But hey, for every 3 leads of Google, we're closing 0.75%. And so he just comes in and brings a spotlight. And as a business owner, you have that decision to open up the door. I love that. Or just keep it shut.
Yeah.
And because I'm not happy and you're not happy at Coconut with where we're at, we want to be doing more. I want to double Green Mango. You want to at least double, if not triple Coconut. You have to open up those doors.
Yeah.
And because you know your numbers, it's impossible to hide the truth. If you're tracking every single system and policy with someone that doesn't have an invested interest, which is a problem, which we can get into or not, but if you don't, you gotta detach that person. So you can't have a sales manager auditing his own sales. You can't have a router auditing their own routes, right?
Yeah.
You have to detach that. and go all in, and you decide as a business owner, because we're wanting to double, like you have to figure out, and that's what I'm so excited about. And we talked about it a little bit on the last podcast, is that it sucks. Like it sucks so bad, and it causes so many problems and sleepless nights and stress and, you know, everything. I feel bad. Someone came in yesterday, like this young kid, and he's like, dude, like, tell me about entrepreneurship. And I was like, I'm going to lay it out honestly with you.
You're
Man.
like, scram, kid.
I'm like, listen, dude, like it sucks. Like it really does. And I went on for like 10 minutes of all the crappiness
He starts
of it.
crying.
No, literally, he like looked at me, and then I was like, but let me tell you what's great, you know, like, and then I fed him, I left him on a high note a little bit, because there are great things about being your own boss.
Yeah.
But as a lot of entrepreneurs that are listening understand, is that you're about to work harder than you ever have. You're about to experience more stress than you've ever experienced. You're about to fight the work-life balance harder than anyone in the whole world, because the work will be the neediest girlfriend or boyfriend you've ever had. It'll always be there, and it'll always want the attention. And you have to figure out how to shut it off. And that's what I was talking to Liz the other night about, is that I'm like, I'm just in a bad place right now because I literally can't shut it off. Like we're on vacation, and I'm waking up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I can't go back to sleep. I'm carrying around my phone the whole time, which on vacations, I usually try to like do a couple hours in the morning, do a couple hours at night, but not have my phone on during the day. And I knew I was in a bad spot, and my work-life balance is off right now because there's so much on my mind, because I'm literally carrying around my phone the whole time. I can't relax. Like my mind's just on it. And like that's what entrepreneurship is. And that's the problems that you have when you go to clean out the business. Now, what I will say, like I told the other kid, is like once we get through these next couple weeks, I think we're down to the next couple weeks of like going in and literally just like bleaching our whole house, that like we're going to enjoy the benefit of having a clean house. We're going to enjoy the benefit that you feel when you walk in and everything's in order. You don't have that drawer that's a mess anymore. And there's no better feeling. I told you, and it's funny, you reminded me, you're like, hey, you remember last July, August, you know, we were talking, and it's like, I have the best life in the whole world. Everything's going great. And I told you, what did I tell you?
I said something bad's going to happen.
I'm like, things are so perfect right now that something bad's going to happen. And sure enough, like within the next month or something, dude, like I feel like I got ran over by a semi, and then he backed up and then ran me over one more time, you know? And that's entrepreneurship, but that's business. And at each level, you're going to have to level up, and you're going to have to go in and clean house, because with what we're trying to do, with the amount of people that are involved, I mean, think about it. Between Coconut and Green Mango, there's over 250 employees. That's a huge telephone game. Like you play the telephone game with 5-6 people, it's a different story when it gets around.
Yep.
And Matt, you know, we have 250 people that we're trying to march down this order. And it's not just, hey, be like everyone else. Like we're very specific. You have to wear this uniform. You have to service this way. You have to say this on the phone. You have like, here's your roadmap for a sales. We're anal on things, right? Like, but that's, and I love it, but that's what makes us us. That's what makes us be able to know that we can double our business, that we can triple Coconut, because we're specific. And it's like I talked about, the path of least resistance is what most human beings want to take. We can't take that.
Yeah.
That's not who we are. And we have to motivate each person to be able to do that. And that's where I talk about, if you have that feeling and you know that something's not right in a department, don't wait a month. Don't wait 3 months. Pull that Band-Aid off and just go. It's not going to get any easier. Deal with it right now.
Yeah. First, I want to acknowledge and point out how important it is as an entrepreneur with your family and with your partner. I just love how, you know, you're emotionally intelligent enough to say, hey, Liz, I'm not in a good place. I can't turn it off. And it's because of this digging that you've been doing. So it's not like, hey, I'm not in a good place because I want more. It's what I've built. There's some leaking pipes.
Yeah.
And, you know, think about building a building and then hearing that the foundation is cracked. It's like, I have a lot of work, and that's what's keeping me up. So I love that, you know, you could go home, you know, even be on vacation and just say, hey, like, just a heads up. I just don't feel like I'm in the best place. But let's talk about some of the things that you end up finding as you make this choice. And it's a very intentional and proactive choice, right? It's like if you finally choose to sit down with that front office employee and you find out you sit down in the chair and you like fall back. Well, didn't that happen to you at Coconut? And you just happen to be in the one broken chair, they said?
Well, I'm in this chair and like I lean back, I pretty much like lay out. And I'm like, and like 2 minutes later, they're like, hey, we really want new desks. And I'm thinking, the chairs freaking suck, but like the desks are nice, but you want a new chair?
Yep.
This doesn't make sense.
It's almost like they look at their rations and they say, hey, if we can get one thing, we really want new desks. But that's a good example of what happens as a business owner or a good leader. When you make that choice to sit down with your people, you naturally will observe things. You say, hey, I think I bought these chairs 4 years ago. And then they turn around, they're like, I hate these chairs. They're so uncomfortable. So even that intentional effort, you're now looking at a couple $1,000 bill, depending on the size of your company, for some new chairs. And then that opens Pandora's box and they say, well, if we can, I'd really love a dual monitor. So you have to differentiate between, necessity and quality of life versus all the extras and luxuries. But that's a good representation of a literal, you sit down and you see this chair is actually broken. They talk about desks, but the same thing happens when you start poking the infrastructure of your company, your standard operating procedures. And then you start seeing how strong are we really in this department? And then what I feel like a topic that we've just absolutely got crushed on is, let's say our CFO says, hey, I got all 4 years of marketing data, that is probably pertinent to our current size. And these areas that you market in, you almost essentially pay 10x on the acquisition cost. And so if you can allocate that money and put it into these few sources, you say, okay, great. I have a problem. I can fix it. But one layer deeper is you find out that data integrity doesn't even serve you in that moment to go make an appropriate decision, because you find out that the sources you're even seeing, people have the ability to change the sources. And then you hear back from employees. So it's such a hard dynamic, because you say, guys, I want you to be open. And then I forget that movie where the two parents are sitting at the edge of the table and they encourage their kids to be open and say everything. And they just start saying them like worst and most vile things that they've been up to. And their parents are like, why are you doing that? So here we say, okay, cool, James, that's great information. Let's go put our marketing dollars in better silos of marketing. And then we find out that those silos and sources aren't even entirely correct, because somebody made the choice to change this silo, this source of marketing to a different one to apply that promotion. And in your mind, you're like, man, you could have just applied that promotion and kept the silo as what it was appropriately. Mm-hmm. So now we don't even know what to do with the information, because data integrity is we're finding out that the more hands you have in the cookie jar for allowing people to change things, the worse off you're going to be when you start trying to really get granular on how you can grow.
I guess what I would say to entrepreneurs is that anytime you look into a department, you will find something. And you have to manage your expectations. It's just at what level is it okay or not okay? Because that's the biggest fear that you have as an entrepreneur. Why a lot of entrepreneurs stay a one-man show is because they're worried about hiring that next employee, because they're not going to be able to do it as good as they do it, right? And so just know that. But there's that gray area, and that's where people get in trouble, is that, hey, like, I have this customer, like, when people call into our customer service representatives, I want them to answer the phone a certain way, like a certain sentence. And I feel like it's pretty easy, but a lot of people don't do it. That's one of those things that's like a non-negotiable for me, that I would love for them to just do. Now, how they carry on the conversation after that, of course, we want them to smile while they're on the phone. We want them to be polite. We want them to build rapport with the customer, and, get to know them a little bit more. And just, like what Sherry does, like everyone loves talking to Sherry at Coconut, because you don't feel like you're calling your cleaners. You feel like you're calling your friend Sherry, and she's so happy. And how do you teach that? I don't know. And are they going to do it as great as you as the owner? Absolutely not. So we're not talking about like that weird area of like they're not doing it as great as you. We're talking about like blatantly going against company policies and procedures. And that's where Tommy talks a lot about manuals. That's why we're doubling down on our manuals this year. Right now, as we speak, we have a full-time person literally going through every single department, writing down the system and procedure of what they do right now. And then she emails it to me. I read through it to make sure it's what I originally wanted, because I haven't been in the billing department for 12 years,
Right.
10 years, right? I want to see what Marcy's now doing. And I'm going to go through it. I might add a couple things. And I hope that Marcy adapts what I suggest to her. And then we've added another layer, which we've talked about on the podcast, is someone to audit it, to make sure that those systems and policies are in place. And that's where I feel like is our next step that gives me hope that we're not going to just keep going in this loop of insanity of every time we come back into a department, it's so far left from what we originally wanted. Like we're in the situations that we are right now, where it's the semi running us over, backing up and hitting us one more time. You know what I mean? And I think the policies can be in place, and the auditors and the managers are the most important people to uphold that system and policy. They need to understand the why behind it, which we've talked about too. I'm a huge believer in that. Don't just put a policy in and say, you have to do this. Help them see the why behind it. And if you can't explain the why behind it and help them buy in on it, you probably shouldn't have it anyway.
Yeah.
So you have the manager, you have it clearly written out in the manual, right? It's being trained that way, because that's another thing. If Joe trains a technician right now versus, let's say, Gustavo, they're getting two different trainings. And who knows if it's even the training that I want. And that's what's so frustrating. But so if I come into the department and I'm like, Gustavo, what the heck are you doing? Or Joe, they're like, dude, we're training them the best we can with the resources that we have. Whose fault is that? It's the owners.
Right.
And that's why manuals are so important. And then the auditors to double check the manager, the manuals. And then if they're still going against it, they either might be in the right seat or wrong, or they might just be on the wrong bus. And that's when you decide if you want to fire someone or not.
To anyone listening, you have to be very intentional about this. You can't just hear a problem and say, guys, what are you doing? It can't be this, and then move on with your day. You have to be very intentional about the resources you give your people and how you go about fixing these issues, because a lot of the people just kind of shrug their shoulders and just say, hey, I've only been here 9 months. This is just what it's been. Mm-hmm. And then you say, what manual did you look at? And they say, I don't know. I was taught by that person. And then you go to that person, you say, who are you taught by? And they said, well, I was taught by this person. It's no longer here. You're like, well, freak. So not only are the manuals important, but just the principle of cleaning out the closet. There's so many diverse ways you can do that. I'm not going to lie. The other day I was tapped.
Because you're a pansy.
Exactly. I was tapped. Okay. And for me to be tapped, it's wild, because I can do so much.
I will say, I'm giving you a hard time, but I don't even believe you when you say that you're tapped. I've never really seen you tapped.
But here's what almost put me over the edge. So if you're saying
that, then I don't believe you.
It was more so like, hey, I'm good. I'm gonna go home.
Okay.
But you know what almost drove me home? Was your email about T-Mobile.
What?
Here you are trying to save a buck. And it's genuinely important. So there's so many ways that you clean out the closet. It's shopping out new prices. So I'm like, where do you have time to do this? You say, hey man, talk to T-Mobile. Told them about our plans. It would save us, $600 a month. And I'm over here like putting out all these fires, just trying to keep things going. And you're doing the same in your own way. And then also simultaneously saying, hey, let's save $600 a month making this move here. The reason at the moment that it came in, I was just like, dude, what are you doing? You said, and then you followed up.
That's what I'm telling you. I'm in a bad spot. And I can't not think about it.
Then you followed up, because I looked at it. I'm like, I'm not responding to this. And then you followed up. You're like, hey man, did you see my T-Mobile? I'm like, Cameron, I'm about to quit, man. Like, I can't. I'm not switching our iPads over to T-Mobile. I would never quit, ever. But that it was just that point of like, you don't stop with, hey, not only can we improve company practices that either help on expenses or help drive revenue, but also on a deeper level with expenses, am I continually shopping out where we get our chemical from? Am I making people compete against each other? I don't know how much money you saved in different changes like that, but I'm confident over 13 years, you've saved millions of dollars being proactive about where you shop from, who you buy product from, who you buy vehicles from. And that's just one of the other ways that you can clean out the closet, because you'll see it reflect on your P&L within a few months on how important those decisions are as well.
You know, one of our salesmen got bit by a pit bull the other day.
Yeah.
Right. And I called him and I was talking to him like, dude, that's freaking scary. It happened to me one time. I was knocking doors. I went up to this door, knocked on it, and you heard this dog barking. And I was like, oh, frick. Like this thing sounds huge. And then I heard the gate. Boom, boom, boom.
Like scratching,
So
like
it went around the side gate. It's pounding the gate.
Ferris
And
Bueller.
I'm like, oh my gosh. The dog gets through the gate, pins me up against the wall. This pit bull. So it comes around the corner, and now I see that it's a pit bull, and it's freaking pissed. It puts me up against the wall, and just as it pins me, the owner opens up the door, and luckily got the dog off.
Oh my gosh.
But that's how I feel like business is.
Yeah.
I have a dog constantly biting at our heels, ready to eat us up, and that's why I told Liz, I'm like, I can't, like, I'm in this, like, you know, I talked about the 18 hours going from 18 hours to 8 hours. And that's why all the other companies started, because you feel lazy. And right now, like, my brain just won't shut off because I feel like there's a pit bull at my heels just trying to bite me, pin me at any second. And entrepreneurship is hard. Like that stat that I shared with the managers the other day about only 4% of the 33 million businesses that there are make it over $1 million in revenue, and only 7% of the 4% make it over 10 million. If we're not on our toes, always trying to be better and save money, like we will get swallowed up. Yep. No matter who you are. If we didn't raise our rates for Green Mango 3 years ago, we would be out of business. We couldn't afford our insurance. We couldn't afford gas. We couldn't afford the increase in salaries that is needed with the economy. Like that would have sank us. We would have closed our doors. So if we weren't proactive in doing that, we're out of business. And that's why no matter how much is going on, and that's why I tell you, like, your business is the most needy girlfriend you've ever had, or boyfriend. Because it'll always want to cheat on you. It'll always want to freaking slap you in the face, and it always wants your attention.
Yeah.
So you have to be proactive. You have to be thinking. You have to have great people. And that's what managers do, is you hire great people. I told you the other day, I'm like, dude, I feel like we're thin right now. We need more people with you to help do this. And those managers need their 7 people. A manager's stressed out because he doesn't have good 7 people on his team, but maybe they're on the right bus, but they're not on the right seat yet because the training needs to be there. And that's the power of cleaning house. That's the power of knowing, what you're doing and being proactive as a business owner.
Yeah. I feel like now that we're talking, we should almost create like a worksheet or a list of all the different areas, because I don't think it's my natural inclination to continually audit the company on that level. And I feel like the more, I
think once we have our policy, like a written policy and training, and then we have our auditors checking on it, I don't know if I could do this again. Like, I hope that it's the last time.
And the reason I say that is that there's so many areas I've thought of as we're talking that were such an intense focus for a week. All of a sudden, we didn't notice that we weren't watching overtime for a couple months. And then we put policies in play to mitigate and reduce the amount of overtime. And then there's rovers, and then there's misters, and there's all these different things that something was neglected for a few months. It reached a boiling point. At that boiling point, it gets to yours and my desk, and then we address it, fix it, solve it. And then sometimes, like you said, we wake up at 4 or 5 in the morning. For me, it's at night before I'm going to bed. I just think, wait, misters was a problem. Like, 9 months ago, 10 months ago. I wonder where we're at. And then I'll text a manager the next morning. I'll say, hey, where are we at? Hey, everything's on cube. But there's been a few times where they say, totally spaced. Let me look into it.
Yeah.
And I just say, you have to be proactive. But what I love about cleaning out the closet is that it becomes the norm where you don't necessarily become cynical, but at the end of the day, you say, this is the hat I'm wearing. I'm playing janitor, I'm playing cleanup, and this is at this scale, especially for green mango and coconut, primarily green mango, is that 1 or 2% marginal changes are hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like we found out that a 5% sway in either direction for completion of jobs is north of $100,000 a month. So they're like, hey, we were given a 10% buffer for completion of jobs. So what do most people do?
They revert.
Yeah, they do the bare minimum. But we talked about the difference between 95% to 100% completion. It's around $108,000. And then when you start finding out that there's 10 other things that equate to around the same amount, you don't start looking at things and saying, oh, this is just good, better, best. This is the name of the game. It's margins.
Yeah.
You distribute the load of responsibility and looking out for those things, and you're going to go so much farther when people start raising the red flag proactively for you 6 months before it was going to be a problem. You know you're winning at that point.